Meet Steve Hall, MD of Executive Sales Coaching Australia and known as Australia's leading authority on C-level sales. He has sold products and services worth over $100 million to senior executives in 23 countries. Steve is a founding member of Sales Masterminds APAC, and Top Sales magazine named him their 50 best keynote speakers in 2020. As a devil's advocate, Steve keeps it real and asks hard questions that get results. He lives in Sydney with his wife, Susan. Steve, welcome to this section in Extraordinary Outcomes, where we are trying to address what we believe is the elephant in the room, and sales professionals are not really talking enough about it, and that's the 5% conversion problem. In B2B sales, the data from Forrester to Gartner to whoever you're looking at ranges between 1.8 to 8%, and which is pretty much abysmal. Where do you stand on that?
Well, it's certainly a problem. I think the issue is not so much that we're not converting enough deals. I think it's we're going for too many deals or going for the wrong deals. I think that's the core issue, is that we are not defining the deals that we go for well enough. We're not qualifying well enough. And because a lot of salespeople in B2B particularly are on quarterly targets, they perhaps do or don't do their own prospecting, but if they do their own prospecting, they may be over optimistic about the possibilities. And if they have prospects given to them, then potentially the people that are compensated on finding leads are compensated to find leads that aren't as suitable as they could be. So I think the nub of the problem is that we should be getting a much higher close rate and a much lower number of deals.
And why do you think we have landed here?
Well, as I said, there's a couple of reasons. Let's look at the SDR model for a moment, where someone who is not who is a less experienced salesperson is perhaps compensated for the number of leads that they get. Or that's targeted with making a certain number of calls a day, and every meeting they schedule is a success. I mean, that particular model rewards quantity over quality. So, and one issue you certainly get is an issue where sales and marketing argue, and marketing says to sales, well, you don't follow our leads up quickly enough, and sales says that's because they're rubbish leads, and often they are rubbish leads. So I think one issue is the non-alignment of targets of sales and marketing in a situation where the salespeople don't do their own prospecting. And where salespeople do their own prospecting, first of all, you've got the boom and bust cycle. Oh gosh, our pipeline's empty. We'd better go out and do a blitz and do lots of prospecting. Then you get one or two or three deals, and you've got to do proposals and demonstrations and negotiations and all the other things that you do in sales. And then all of a sudden you put your head up and you've got an empty pipeline again. So I think the basic problem is a lack of an intelligent, aligned prospecting, selling system where the right people do the right work at the right time.
Let's unpack this a bit in your vision. We are getting bad leads because marketing and sales are not aligned.
Well, but before we start, let me give you my key caveat, which is everything I say, it depends. It depends on what you sell. It depends on who you sell it to. It depends upon the value of what you sell. So there's obviously exceptions everywhere. But in the main, as you were saying, when sales and marketing aren't aligned, that is one of the key reasons for poor leads and poor conversion rates.
Okay, so let's analyze this bit a little more. Inside the same company, which apparently has a product or a suite of products which is being sold and for which marketing is generating leads and sales is actually trying to go and convert them, why this disconnect at all?
Well, again, it depends. I mean, when we say a company, we could mean, I used to work for a company selling ERP software. We had 15 people. when I joined. Later on, we had 30, 40, 50 people, and sales and marketing was perfectly aligned because I was in charge of both. Whereas if you're looking at Oracle, which has got tens of thousands of people, you've got totally separate systems. So the reasons why sales and marketing aren't aligned vary dramatically depending upon the size of the company, the geography, and other things. But traditionally, where you try and, I think there's been in many cases, the philosophy has been, let's get different people to do different jobs, which is not a bad thing to do, but the jobs they've chosen to give out have been possibly not the right jobs to the right people. And I'm particularly thinking of an instance where, supposing you're selling to something that is high value, let's say $500,000 upwards, and and when you're selling that to an organization, the person that makes the ultimate decision as to whether to buy or not necessarily the people that do the day-to-day stuff, but the one that signs the checks and ticks it, is a senior executive. If you're trying to get the original meeting with them, to get in front of them, to talk to them about their issues and what they sell, and the person that's doing that is a 25-year-old trainee salesperson with no business expertise, it's very difficult for them to have an intelligent conversation at that person's level, particularly if that person is getting calls from 155 other 25-year-old SDRs who've got no expertise. So, that's one. There's many issues, but that's one issue. So my belief is, if you're going to call someone at a relatively senior level, you need at least to be able to speak their language. And I don't mean English or French, I mean their business language. And that's the language of the position they're in, and also the language of the industry they're in. So a pharmaceutical company uses different language to a book publisher, for instance. Sure. And if you're just trying to sell stuff, then you need to be able to connect with the people you're trying to sell stuff to. Another thing is, of course, that a lot of leads generated by marketing are done via LinkedIn, via emails, via search engine optimization, etc. And by their very nature, those leads are lower down the corporate totem pole, because senior executives don't spend their time Googling for pieces of software or reading emails or doing those things. So the very nature of the way that you generate leads dictates the level of those leads. And if a lead is generated with a deputy IT manager, but the final decision's made by the CIO or by the managing director, you've got that problem of dealing at very low levels and then trying to get to high levels.
So if I've understood you correctly, apart from, we'll keep the marketing and sales alignment issue separate now that we have spoken about it. The crux, even when you began this discussion, the crux is about the quality of the leads, right? Irrespective of how it's getting generated, it's not the quality that will generate results.
It's the quality that will generate results, and
That's
obviously
right.
Obviously you do want as many quality leads as you can get. With the proviso, there's a limit to how many quality opportunities a salesperson can handle at any one time.
Right.
And I think a lot of salespeople are under pressure to have a full pipeline based upon it's upside down logic. The logic is, okay, we only close 5%. We need to make $5 million. Therefore, we need 20 times $5 million in our pipeline to make sure we make our targets.
Yes.
And that means that that there's all this pressure to fill the pipeline, which leads to a pipeline full of rubbish, which leads to the 5% qualification. So it's a circular argument. Yes. Whereas the argument should be, okay, we need to make $5 million. Let's find 10 leads or 5 leads that will and we'll close 20% of them, and we'll make our target. So if people are scared to clear out their pipeline because their management demands to have this full pipeline, and so they spend a large proportion of their time chasing deals they're never going to win in a million years.
Absolutely, which means also a huge amount of loss in productivity, right? If you're spending your time doing that, you're not doing the other thing, which is to sell.
Exactly.
I'll come back to this, but I want to dig a little more on how you think great leads can be generated.
Okay, well, again, it depends. Let's talk for a second about the difference between leads and conversations.
Sure.
Just imagine that. I'm just trying to think. You're a senior executive in a large organization, right? You're my ideal prospect. I know that my ideal prospect is a company that's got revenue of more than $100 million, that's in a particular industry, in a particular geography, and the person that if I could speak to any single person in that company, it's either CEO or the CMO or the CFO, someone senior, right? That's my ideal target. And I'm selling artificial intelligence software. And one of the things the artificial intelligence software does is helps my customers to sell more stuff. A very basic issue, right? Okay. Now, if I flip it a second and I say, okay, you're the head of sales in that organization, and the business problem you've got is we're not selling enough stuff. So how many different ways can you solve that problem? You can solve it in 100 different ways. You can change your pricing. You can sack salespeople. You can do sales training. You can listen to podcasts like this. And there's a 1,000 different ways to solve that problem. But let's just imagine that by pure luck, you get together with all your other executives and you say, look, the big problem we've got is that we aren't getting enough intelligence about our sales, and we need to buy a wonderful piece of artificial intelligence software to help us do this. Now, probably one company in 20 or one company in 50 will take that conclusion rather than a different conclusion. So right off the bat, 19 companies you could have helped haven't gone down the road that leads to you. But let's suppose you're lucky and they say, what we really need is a whiz-bang artificial intelligence system that will help us. So what do? They go off and say, okay, well, what's in the market? And they call up their managers and they say, look, do some research. And their manager says to someone a bit lower down, go off and do your research and look at what's in the market. And then people 2 or 3 or 4 levels down from the decision makers do the search. Look on the. They're the people that the leads that are generated by SEO, by email marketing, by all these other things. And then at some stage they go back to their bosses and they say, okay, we've looked at the market. And it also means, by the way, that if you're a small company with a brilliant solution, it's very hard for you to get traction because all the big companies with not such good solutions have got the money to pour into search engine optimization and marketing, etc. But they go back and they say to their managers, okay, we've looked at the market and this is what our competitors are using, and this is what else there is out there, and this is how much they've told us it'll cost, and this is how long it'll take, and then the senior executives say, okay, let's do it. And all of that happens before a lead becomes a lead.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you haven't been talking to people earlier on, when a lead happens, the chances are that, sure, maybe they're the right type of company. Maybe they've got a problem you can help them with. Maybe they are looking right at this very moment. But they've already talked to 10 people that weren't you. They've already researched people that weren't you. So that's another reason that we're not closing deals. We're getting into deals too late. So my philosophy is that you're better off targeting a narrower but more higher quality group of potential customers by having a very clearly defined ideal customer profile, approaching them and meeting them at the right level earlier on. And yeah, sure, that maybe you're meeting them and they haven't got a lead. They're not ready yet, but they may be ready in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or a year. And if you're talking to them until they are ready, then when they are ready, they know you and you know them. Right. But the problem is we all want hot leads now. I did some work for one of the largest software companies in the world, and they wanted to focus on finance companies in Australia and say, can you get us meetings at executive level? I said, yeah, of course I can. So we got them a heap of meetings. But they stopped after 6 months because they said, we're not getting any hot leads. And I said, well, you're not looking for hot leads. You're looking to build relationships at executive level. So that's another of the problems. We're all impatient and we're not. And because another part, God, there's so many problems. Another problem is the high turnover of salespeople. This guy's not making their numbers. They've failed to make their numbers, or this person hasn't made their numbers for 3 quarters on the trot. We better get rid of them and bring in another one and another one. I mean, imagine if you did that with a football player.
Exactly.
I mean, Liverpool and Real Madrid identify potential stars when they're 9 years old, and and 1 in 50 of them. I haven't thought of this analogy before. It's a good one. 1 in 50 of them gets to make the first team 10 years later, and 1 in 200 of them becomes a superstar. But they don't go out. I mean, some of them do say, okay, we need a goal scorer. We need a hot goal scorer that can stick the ball in their net right now. And sure, they can get one of those, but it costs them $200 million.
Exactly. This is great, actually. The ability to define your ideal customer profile and your ability to engage with them early on without the impatience. I mean, anyway, impatience is part of this era, right? We are sort of brought up upon instant gratification, starting with instant coffee. I mean, we don't have the patience to brew a nice cup, is it not?
Speak for yourself. I haven't had a cup of instant coffee for 35 years. And I drink coffee every day.
Okay, guilty. But the point remains that we are looking for, like you said, we want hot leads now. We want to have somebody to whom we can sell right away. So that takes me to another side of the problem. Do you think the way we are setting quotas, setting targets, setting our sales goals are actually completely outdated? It's completely arbit and it has no scientific basis.
Yes, absolutely. I also think the way we compensate salespeople is wrong too. I think that when you get what you pay for, and if you pay people to close deals, they will try their best to close deals. And if you pay people to generate leads, they will generate as many as they can. And it also encourages people focusing on their own individual goals rather than working as a team. So if you're paid to generate leads and someone says to you, "Can you do some research for me?" "Oh no, I don't get paid to do that."
Right.
Whereas if you have a team-based approach where a team works together to, sure, the end result is sales, and the necessary components of the research, the lead generation, the messaging, all those other things, then it's good to have the best people to do each task and the most economical people to do each task. But so I'm quite a big believer in having people do what they're good at, and not only what they're good at, but what they enjoy doing.
Yes.
One of the challenges we have is we say to people, you must prospect. And some people hate prospecting. So you say, okay, if you hate prospecting, that's okay, but you must prospect, so make yourself do it. And you know as well as I do, if you're continually dragging yourself to do something you don't do as good a job, you don't do it as well. Whereas if you get people who are good at prospecting, who are good at talking to people, and you focus on them. Now, what we've done in the past is to say, okay, well, our account managers who are good at handling a sale, who can talk a business conversation, who can bring together all of the elements and who can close a deal, they're rare. They're the strikers of the sales team. Therefore, they cost us a lot of money. So we don't want them doing tasks that they're not suitable for. So what we'll do, we'll get SDRs or BDs, whatever you call them, because they're cheaper. And often we will even say, okay, well, what we'll do, we'll outsource it to another company or to, potentially to a cheaper country, and we'll get them to flood the market with calls, and then we'll bring them in. Now, again, if you flip the switch and say, okay, you're the prospect, and you're getting calls from these people, and you're not only getting calls from these people from your company, you're getting calls from these people from 800 other companies.
Exactly.
It's everyone tends to think of it from their perspective. If we make 1,000, we're going back in a circle. But if we make 1,000 calls a day, then we'll get enough numbers. But if everybody else is making 1,000 calls a day, you're one snowflake in a blizzard.
Absolutely. In fact, that has been one of the points I have been very invested in, that lot of this comes from the industrial era selling requirements where I have mass manufactured, figured out how to mass manufacture something. Now I need to go out and find some outlets which will help me move these. And I don't care who the end customers are. I don't know what they feel. I don't know. I just need this margin, which is also I guess, the starting of the incentivization and the quota. This is a very industrial era thought process. In fact, a related, very interesting point to what you just said, Steve, is that are we compensating correctly? How do we compensate a salesperson and incentivize him to do things that we want him to do but may not get the result, right? And in the end of it, he will not get the result. That's why 60% of the SDRs don't make their quota, and they don't get the money that they thought they will make. And that's why the churn. So see, these are all linked, correct?
Absolutely, and the churn is terrible because when an SDR or an account executive leaves an organization, they often take their expertise with them that they've learned. They spend 12 months getting to know the job, and then they get moved on. They take the connections, they take the relationships, because no matter how well you type things into a CRM, and let's face it, no one does, but no matter how well you do it, that's not the same as having that knowledge. And the other thing, of course, is if you're supposed to put everything into a CRM, then you're spending half your time doing administrative work rather than the work you're supposed to be doing. So, I mean, I have a model which, well, first of all, let's look at the compensation. My philosophy, if it can be done, is to build team-based quotas. Sure, you pay an account executive more than a person making the calls, and differently to a person making research. But if you succeed in whether it's by selling a deal or by making a particular target for revenue and everything, everyone should be compensated to some degree. So maybe it's based upon a percentage of salary, maybe it's a bonus, but paying a few people a massive commission, and the people that do the hack work get $30 a lead or whatever it might be. They're just out of sync.
Yeah.
So it depends upon the size of the company and many things, but the model I like is this. Get people who are intelligent, well targeted, and well trained, and who enjoy doing it, to research your customers. First of all, it's a strategic decision. What is our ideal customer profile? How big are they? What geography are they in? What industries are they in? What characteristics do they have? Once you've got that, the next question is, okay, which physical companies fit that profile? How many are there in my region? So maybe your ideal customer profile says with this and this industry and this size. Okay, how many companies are there? Now, what most people do, they go out and buy a list, but lists are rubbish. So get the people doing the research to research and say, okay, I've done my research, and these are the companies that fit that profile. Okay, that's not that hard. And those people can be comparatively lower paid, even though they can be university students, that can be outsourced, but they can be people who've got a clearly defined goal, who enjoy doing research, but maybe aren't good on the phone, for instance. And then they say, okay, these are the companies in our target marketplace. These are the specific executives or people we want to get to, because that requires research too. And then when you go to the next stage, the people that are doing the outbound calling as opposed to the inbound calling. Let's look at both. You want to go to them, and you want them to come to you. So if you know who those companies are, you know who to go to. If you know who these companies are and you get a lead and they come to you, you say to them, oh, we've got someone that's inquired on our website. Let's look and see if they're on our list of ideal customers. Oh, they're not. So they're a junior programmer in a company, in an industry we don't service, in a company that does 3 and 6 months a week, So we'll be polite and answer them, but we should say, look, I'm terribly sorry, we're not your thing. I mean, how many times have you been on a website where you've been researching or you've been wanted to look up something, and you get a phone call from someone and say, I saw you on our website. Can I sell you a $8 million system? It's a waste of everything. So understand your target market really well. If people come to you, see if they're on your target market, right? If a relatively junior person does research and calls you and says, I want more information, you don't go back and try and get to the company through them. You go to the top and say, I hear you're looking it up, and you work your way down. So that's inbound, and outbound, you target the people that you want to target, but you don't look for people who are looking right now. You'll find them. Sure, you'll find them, and that's great. Well, it's sort of great because maybe you're too late. Maybe they already know what they want and they're just testing them out. They just want you as column fodder. But you go to them, and if you want hot leads in June of 2022, you should be talking to senior executives today to get those hot leads. So that's and so you get, and then the people that make the calls, depending on the methodology you use, should someone, and that could be different people, needs to do the research. Okay, I want to get into this company. They're this type of company. This is what I sell. These are the business problems I can solve. Let me look at that company in a bit more detail. What does their annual report say? What do they say on the website? What do we know about them through our research? Who is likely to have the type of problem I can solve? And let's talk to them about that problem. And if we can solve 10 problems, we can go to them and say, hi, I'd like to talk to you about solving problem X. Oh no, we don't have problem X. Okay, great. You go back 2 weeks later. How about I talk to you about solving problem Y? So rather than trying to flog your stuff, you'll try to help them solve problems. And the people that do that need to, at least as a minimum, be able to talk intelligently about that problem. Sure. And then maybe they're the account executives, or maybe you hand over. But when you hand over, it's an intelligent handover. So that's a model that I prefer much more than the existing ones.
Do you think that what you just told me is a well-kept secret, or people should know about it? What you just told me. Do you think people know this?
I don't think very many people do it. I think there's a great deal of this is what we always do, or this is the latest trend. I mean, SDRs, search engine optimization was all the rage, 10 years ago? Yeah. Okay. SDRs, again, probably came in initially 20 years ago, but at that stage I think they were more highly skilled. But the accountants and the people that look at the numbers said, oh, these are costing too much. It's a cheap thing. Let's outsource it or downskill it. And so you get a gradual deterioration of the quality. And I think a lot of people just do what they've always done. And there's a lot of sales gurus that talk about. See, the thing is, people will say sales is this. Sales is a numbers game. Sales is about this. Sales is about that. And that's garbage, because sales encompasses everything from someone in McDonald's saying, would you like fries with that, to selling aircraft carriers to Qatar. Although I don't suppose Qatar have got many aircraft carriers, but you get my point. Sales is massive, and you can't make a blanket statement that sales is this or sales is that. I'm being boring now because I've said this a million times, but socks, one size all doesn't even work for socks. And if it doesn't work for socks, how can it possibly work for something as complex as B2B sales?
Very well said, Steve. Thank you very much. I hope we covered some ground to your satisfaction. And
well, you got me talking a lot, which is never good, because I'm a salesperson. I should be listening.
Well, this session was for you to talk, so I think I think we are good. Thank you very much, Steve. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, thank you very much for your quite incisive questions that drew me out a bit.